$1.595 trillion. Not a projection, not a forecast. Committed capital, verified, sourced from SEC filings and press releases. 132 companies, 32 states, 15 months. The headlines told you America was losing. Factories closing, jobs disappearing, supply chains crumbling. The narrative was relentless. But while the narrative ran, the money moved. And money does not lie. So why hasn't anyone reported this number? Because it does not fit the story. The story is decline, deindustrialization, told for 40 years. But the data says something completely different. 1.595 trillion in private sector capital does not move unless investors believe the bet is real. Let us start with scale. $1.595 trillion is larger than the GDP of Australia, larger than Spain, more than double Argentina, and it is not spread thin. 79.8% comes from just 8 companies. 8 companies making commitments so large they are restructuring entire industries. If you want to see the real numbers behind the headlines, subscribe to the Data Desk and hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. The single largest commitment belongs to Apple. $600 billion, 4 years, AI servers, supplier ecosystems, workforce training. The company that once moved everything to China is now anchoring the infrastructure of American technology. $600 billion from Apple, $200 billion from Micron, memory fabs in Idaho and Virginia, $150 billion from IBM, $100 billion from TSMC in Arizona, $60 billion from Texas Instruments across 7 chip facilities. That is $1.11 trillion from 5 companies alone. The story does not stop at semiconductors. Johnson & Johnson committed $58 billion, AstraZeneca $54.5, Roche $50.7. A $300 billion pharmaceutical reshoring wave running alongside the chip build-out. America is not rebuilding one industry, it is rebuilding the stack. Texas leads all states, $585 billion across 13 projects. Virginia at $259 billion, Arizona at $102 billion, North Carolina $67 billion, 15 separate projects, the most individual commitments of any state in the tracker. Just in the final 2 weeks of March 2026, UCB, $2 billion for the first U.S. biologics facility in Georgia. Tesla and LG Energy, $4.3 billion for battery production in Michigan. The pipeline is not slowing, it is accelerating. The Industrial Sage tracker counts only verified investments of $50 million or more. Every entry sourced, every company named. This is not a talking point. This is private sector capital allocation, the hardest signal in economics. 1.595 trillion in 15 months. Something structural is changing. What is driving it, and what does it mean for American workers right now? That data, next. The question is not whether the money is real. The tracker proves it is. The question is what forced it. Because capital this large does not move by accident. It moves because the rules changed. And the rules changed fast. In April 2025, Liberation Day tariffs went into effect. Average U.S. tariff rates on Chinese goods hit 47.5%, covering 100% of all Chinese exports to America, according to the Peterson Institute. The message to corporate boardrooms was clear. If your supply chain runs through China, your cost structure just changed permanently. Not temporarily, permanently. 82% of global supply chain executives reported their operations were impacted by the new tariff regime, according to a McKinsey survey conducted in 2025. Between 20 and 40% of those companies began actively restructuring their sourcing. That restructuring has a destination, and the destination is the United States. But tariffs alone do not explain $1.595 trillion. The second driver is something deeper. It is the recognition, finally, that supply chain concentration is an existential risk. The COVID supply chain collapse was the warning shot. Chip shortages that shut down auto plants for months, medical equipment that could not be sourced, baby formula that vanished from shelves. Every one of those crises traced back to the same root cause: critical production concentrated in one region of the world with no domestic backup. The CHIPS and Science Act, passed in 2022, put the first federal incentive behind fixing that. As of February 2026, the CHIPS Program Office has issued preliminary or finalized awards to over 30 companies across more than 45 project locations, according to the Semiconductor Industry Association. 18 new semiconductor fabs began construction in 2025 alone. The majority began operations between 2026 and 2027. TSMC, Micron, Samsung, and Eli Lilly all have major facilities breaking ground or opening this year. And the numbers behind the jobs are just as striking. Since 2010, the reshoring initiative has tracked over 2 million U.S. manufacturing jobs announced through reshoring and foreign direct investment. In 2024 alone, 244,000 jobs were announced. 1.7 million of those announced positions have already been filled. Now look at January 2026. Manufacturing job openings hit 495,000, up 11% year over year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Revised data released in April 2026 now shows the January figure was actually 510,000. More than 500,000 open manufacturing jobs, right now, in America. That is the tension nobody is covering. The investment wave is real. The job openings are real. And yet, 69% of manufacturers already reshoring report they cannot find enough workers to fill the positions, according to a Reshoring Initiative survey from 2025. The capital is here. The facilities are going up. The openings exist. The workforce gap. That is the story hiding inside the headline number. And it sets up a question that determines whether $1.595 trillion delivers on its full promise. How does America close that gap? The data, next. 510,000 open manufacturing jobs. That number tells you two things simultaneously. Demand for American manufacturing workers is real and accelerating, but supply is not keeping up. The gap between those two realities is the most important economic story in America right now. Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute project that by 2033, the sector will need 3.8 million new workers. Nearly half, 1.9 million, are at risk of going unfilled. The National Association of Manufacturers reported in Q3 2025 that manufacturers averaged 4.2% of roles sitting empty at any given moment. The skills gap cost American manufacturers $47 billion annually in productivity losses. 80% of manufacturing executives surveyed by Deloitte in 2025 plan to invest 20% or more of their improvement budgets into technology to address it. The answer to a worker shortage is increasingly automation. The automation wave is already building. The global industrial automation market was valued at $184 billion in 2025, growing at 8.5% annually. U.S. robot density currently stands at 307 robots per 10,000 manufacturing employees, 8th globally. But that ranking is about to shift significantly. PwC's February 2026 Global Manufacturing Outlook found the share of manufacturers planning to highly automate key processes by 2030 will more than double, from 18% to 50%. Among companies already using automation, 53% report increased productivity. This is where the $1.595 trillion investment wave and the workforce gap converge. The new facilities, TSMC's Arizona fabs, Micron's Idaho plants, pharmaceutical campuses across the Carolinas, are not the factories of 1985. They are highly automated, high-skill environments where one trained technician oversees processes that once required dozens of workers. Fewer jobs per dollar invested, but dramatically higher wages per job. Average hourly earnings in manufacturing reached $36.07 as of December 2025, according to BLS data. Real earnings rose 1.4% in the 12 months ending February 2026. Thoughtful, the new semiconductor, and biotech facilities skew even higher. Production roles routinely paying $60 to $100 per hour. Apple's American Manufacturing Program, expanded March 2026, now includes 4 new supplier partners, building the entire ecosystem around the investment, not just one facility. TSMC's Arizona fab is on track to purchase over 100 million advanced chips from its own Arizona facility in 2026. The plant skeptics called impossible is now producing at scale. The workforce gap is real. The automation shift is real. But the wages being created and the ecosystems being built point towards something headline jobs numbers cannot capture yet. This is a 15-year structural build. America is 4 quarters in. The full scorecard and what it means for America's global position, that data is next. Here's what the full scorecard shows. U.S. manufacturers contributed $2.95 trillion to the American economy in Q3 2025, according to the National Association of Manufacturers. Nearly $3 trillion in value-added output from a sector the mainstream narrative declared dead 20 years ago. Manufacturing output rose 0.6% in January 2026, the strongest gain since February 2025. Then March 2026 added 15,000 manufacturing jobs, the largest monthly gain of the year, a 400% increase year over year per BLS data released April 3rd. Now the competitive picture. U.S. nominal GDP stands at $30.5 trillion, 60% larger than China at $19.2 trillion. U.S. firms hold over 50% of global semiconductor market share. American AI investment in 2025 ran 3 to 4 times China's pace. This rebuild is happening from a position of strength. China's trade surplus hit a record $1.2 trillion in 2025, driven by overproduction and weak domestic demand, not strength. The U.S.-China goods deficit has already fallen 50% from its 2022 peak of $382 billion. The structural pressure on China's export model is building. The investment flowing in is not just American capital. The UAE committed $1.4 trillion in U.S. investments per the White House March 2026 tracker. Hyundai committed $21 billion. Foreign capital is voting with its feet, and it is voting for America. $1.595 trillion is not the end of the story. It is the foundation. 18 new semiconductor fabs began construction in 2025, most coming online in 2026 and 2027. The pharmaceutical reshoring wave at $312 billion is still in early stages. Automotive commitments are still converting from announcement to steel and concrete. The critics have a point worth acknowledging. Announced capital is not deployed capital. Some projects will face delays. The reshoring initiative flagged that 2025 job. Numbers may come in below 2024, depending on policy stability. But 1.7 million reshoring jobs have already been filled since 2010. Those are not announcements. Those are Americans with paychecks. The data does not tell a simple story. The investment wave is the largest in American manufacturing history. The workforce challenge will take a decade to solve. Automation is accelerating faster than the hiring curve. And the geopolitical pressure to produce in America is not going away. $1.595 trillion, 132 companies, 32 states. A capital allocation decision made by the largest corporations on Earth. Capital does not lie. Read the data. See the world differently. What story should we break down next? Drop it in the comments, and we will see you in the next data file.